Oh, delighted to get a few minutes with Harshika, who is a Procurement Associate at Eli Lilly. Harshika, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Viraj, for having me. I'm really excited.
Awesome. Let's start with a quick introduction. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, most definitely. So, hi everyone. For all those who are listening or watching, my name is Harshika, and I came to America in 2017 as an international student from India. I went to Purdue University, and initially I started out with management major, but I was like, nah, there's so many options. I'm going to do something more. So I ended up diverting to supply chain because we have STEM option in Granite. So woohoo for that. There are not a lot of business schools which offer STEM majors, so this was one of them. So I ended up doing supply chain. And then during the COVID year, I got an internship with Zimmer Biomet as a finance intern. I didn't quite like it. So I knew that finance was not my forte. And then when I was applying for a full-time position, I worked with Eli Lilly and Company now as a procurement associate. But yeah, in school, I was pretty much involved in a lot of things. And growing up, I was in a boarding school. So
Got it. And when did you graduate from Purdue?
I graduated in 2021, so last year.
2021. Got it.
May.
When did you start searching for full-time job opportunities when you were in college?
So as soon as my internship with Zimmer Biomet got over after my junior year, that is when I knew that I didn't want to work for Zimmer Biomet, but also I had a good background with pharmaceutical companies and biomed companies because of my experience with Zimmer. So that is when I started applying, which should be like August of 2021, and then I was applying online, and I was also going and visiting career fairs. So those were the two modes that I used.
Got it. So, I mean, you kind of started searching for full-time opportunities right after your junior year internship. So,
Yes,
like,
right.
basically the beginning of your last year is when you kind of actively started looking for job opportunities, right? Got it.
Yes, right.
And how did you initially approach your job search? I know you mentioned that you kind of went through the career fairs that Purdue has. Was there anything in particular that you were doing to kind of, understand like how you approach your job search?
Yeah, so I'll give it to you in 3 points mainly. The first one was the career fair route, which is what most students do. There are a lot of people who come and you interact with them and things like that. So one of the ideas that I'd incorporated from the beginning was that no matter what year I was in at Purdue, I used to go to all career fairs and I used to still meet all of the employees that I was interested in, just because I know that they would remember me the next year. And that is exactly how I'd actually ended up getting my internship. It was when I had gone my first year when I met Steven from Zimmer Biomet, and he said, "Oh no, we only take juniors." And then I went second year, and he was like, "Oh no, I only take juniors." And there was a third year, I was like, "You know what? I'm a junior here. Take my resume." And then okay, let's do an interview. So one of the methods that I adopted was just being out there and showing my face regularly and meeting them. So that was one thing I did. The second thing I did is that I realized that I was friends with a lot of seniors who had graduated and who were working for very big companies. So I started reaching out to them and I asked them for referrals. And that got me a lot of interviews as well. So that was one of the other things I did. I really wanted to make sure that I make use of all of my resources and my friends and connections. And I researched upon the company and the job ID, and I let them know that I wanted to apply for so-and-so role. So they helped me with that. And the third was Google. I have heard Google is amazing, and Google has worked for me before as well, because I think I did get a couple of interviews from that. I just made a quick job search in what industry I wanted in, what area I wanted it in. And I was like bulk applying. I had my resume ready and I was like, okay, hit send, hit send, hit send. So those are the three things that I did.
The first point that you mentioned, especially about, like you went to that particular company in the first year and then the second year and the third year, that kind of really shows the importance of maintaining those relationships through years. And then eventually when there's time, like that person will remember you and then that person will give you a shot. That's such an important insight, I think, that you shared with us. Looking back now, would you have changed the approach that you took for searching for jobs? Anything new that you would have added or anything you would have changed?
One thing that I would have definitely added was that, so the story of how I ended up with my full-time offer is that I was actually in the career fair and it was all virtual. So you had to stand in lines. And I was like, okay, like, so many companies are like 15, 16 people waiting. And I was like, I'm done with this. I've already applied everywhere. I've heard a few interviews and I didn't want to do it until I was talking to my roommate. And she said that, oh, you know what? Actually, the line is really short. You should just go talk to them. And I was like, okay, maybe I should. So I logged back on only to talk to Lily. And that's how I got my full-time offer, just because my roommate said, the line is short, just go talk to them. So one thing I would do is that I would have stayed on and talked to more companies. I only stayed on and spoke to Lilly. So one thing I would definitely do is talk to more companies. The line is worth it because it was worth it for me. So I know that it might work for somebody else. So I don't think that just because the line is long, that can be an excuse to not talking to them. So that is something that I would definitely do next time. But I'm glad I did it this time also.
That was
Even
at the
if
career fair, right?
it was at the career fair, yeah.
And what duration of the day was it? Was it towards the end? Was it towards the beginning?
I think it was towards 2, 3 p.m. I wouldn't say end technically, but it was right after so morning is the most busiest when you're like, okay, I'm so active. And the minute you have lunch, you want to go off to sleep. So that is the time when I was like, let it be, I'm done. But then I was like, no, let me log back on and just do one more. I wish I had done 5 more instead of doing one more. But yeah.
And the reason why I asked this is because through the past podcast as well, I've heard that there's a high probability of getting a good conversation in first and then eventually getting an interview as well towards the end of the day, because everyone is exhausted. Not a lot of people are there in the career fair. And then the companies may have some slots for the interview, for a 30 minutes interview that's on campus. So I've heard that works. That's the reason why I asked you, like, if it was towards the end of the day, that would just strengthen what I've seen previously. But yeah, even what you mentioned right after lunch, when not a lot of people are visiting or they're just trying to take a nap or something, that's also a good time to actually talk to companies. And then
I 100% agree, and mostly because there's a logical answer to this. When you're starting off, and if I'm a recruiter, I know that there are going to be so many people coming. So initially I want to be choosy because I can't just hand away interviews to anybody and everybody. I want to be like, I want the top of the candidates.
Yep.
But then by the time you come towards the evening, you're like, I still have spots left. I was too picky. So now whoever comes, they get an advantage that, okay, because somebody's already spoken to you in the morning, might not come back in the evening, but a fresh person who is very good, does not have to be the top candidate, might end up getting an interview. So yeah, I definitely agree that the second half is something that we need to all capture.
Absolutely. How did you prepare for the interviews that you got?
So I was telling you when we were talking offline, that I'm a big planner. I want to know that, what questions can come. I want to anticipate everything. I want to have things ready. So what I do is that I have this PDF or Word document, and I think about 5 or 6 situations that have happened in my life that can be applied to different questions. So I think about it and I'm like, okay, so, in this project, for example, I helped so-and-so. I also faced with a difficulty and I also had to make a decision. So this one example covers 3 questions that might come. So I think about 6 different scenarios, 1 or 2 from my high school, most of them from my experience at Zimmer Biomet or my experience at Purdue or my involvement at extracurricular clubs and stuff. And then I go through that. But one of the main questions was that describe who you are in a few words. That is something that I make sure that I talk very deeply about. I think it's very important to just get across your background, where you're coming from, what you're doing, why you're here, why you're in America and working. So I prepare all of those questions. I write it so I know what exactly I have to say. And then I go through it a few times knowing that, okay, so now when they ask me questions, I'm ready. I'm like, okay, I have 6 situations. I quickly think which situation applies and I just apply it. Yeah.
Got it. So there was a lot of preparation that you did early on. There's a lot of thought process clarification that you kind of went through. A lot of reflection, I guess, understanding the problems or the challenges that you have faced in the past, and then keeping those stories in mind, and then making sure that you can associate that story with different scenarios or different questions that the interviewer can ask. Phenomenal.
Because they ask 1,000 questions. You can't anticipate 1,000 questions, exactly. But you can find the 6 or 7 incidents in your life and just apply to those 1,000 questions. So I thought that reverse psychology was working better, at least for me. So yeah.
Looking back now, would you have done something different to prepare for the interviews?
I think one thing I would have done different is that I would have practiced more with actual people. that is what I should have done. I practiced a lot by myself,
Hmm.
but it is obviously different when there's somebody in front of you on camera or like in reality and you're talking to them, because that shows a lot, not about the quality of your answers, but the way that you are behaving, like the way you're projecting yourself, your personality, your eye contact, the way you're talking, how you're talking. Are you making any silly mistakes? Are you using filler words? Are you looking confident or not looking confident? So I think those are the things that I would have definitely want to practice with somebody being there, rather than just reading through my answers. Like my focus was, okay, my quality of answer should be very good, but
Yeah.
I think I should have focused a little bit more about how I'm going to be presenting myself to them.
The delivery aspect
Yeah,
of
the
the
delivery.
as well.
Exactly. Thank you for putting that into words. The delivery aspect of the interview. Yeah.
So we spoke about how you approach your job search and what you would have changed if you were to go back. We spoke about the interviews that you got and then how you prepared for the interviews. And there's one aspect that a lot of people may not necessarily do, but sometimes people kind of do, and then they actually get amazing results. Is to actually approach the companies to get the interviews, because it's one thing to apply and then just wait for the interview to kind of come through and then you go to the interview. It's a completely different thing to actually seek out that interview and then to actually capture it. So was there anything that you were doing to get the interviews from the companies you applied for?
I would say that the only thing that I really did was going back again and again. And the last time I went, I didn't say hi, hello. I wasn't like, hi, my name is Hashika. Do you remember me? I was like, I know you remember me because I have been showing you my face for so long now. Give me that interview. Like I literally went up and he was a really tall guy. And I was like, give me that interview. And he was like, and he started laughing. And he was
Yeah.
like, okay, you like the confidence. Let's go. We'll give you an interview. He did not even ask me for my resume. He didn't ask if I had work experience. Just by the fact that he knew that I was coming again and again and that I wanted it was
Persistence. Yeah.
reason enough for him to be like, okay, here, take it. So that's the only time that I actually asked for it. But yeah, I don't think I've been active in going and asking them, hey, can I have an interview?
Specifically, yeah, because I know, like I've heard sometimes people would actually, like they're so passionate about a particular company or even a particular role that they would find all sorts of ways to get the first interview and then at least get on a call with the HR and then take it from there. But yeah, like it just depends on person to person.
Yeah. So right now I'm also applying for jobs just to see where else I can get it, just to change industries, because I've been in the pharma company now. I want to move to the industry. Um, and I am applying for jobs, but there is one job that I really liked, and I did reach out to one of the executives over there, and I set up a call and I spoke to him because I was like, okay, no, I'm really interested. So I just want to let you know that I've applied, and hi, my name is Hashika. Let's talk, like that. So yeah, I did put my name out there, but I didn't be like, okay, give me an interview.
Absolutely. Pivoting towards some company specific questions,
Mhm.
how did you come across your specific role of procurement associate at your company, Eli Lilly? Was it just through the career fair, or did you do something like beforehand, before the career fair, and then kind of went from there?
Yeah. So I'll answer that question, and that's a very good question. Basically, I used to be in Dostal Leadership Academy when I was in Purdue. It's one of the clubs where there are a lot of students. They take you on like a 1 day outing to a different city where there are lots of companies and you can interact with them. So I had come to Indy back when I was a sophomore, I guess, and we were in Cummins, in the Cummins Indy office, but there were a lot of recruiters from Roche, from Lilly, and from different companies in Indy, which are like based out of Rolls Royce and more. So I was speaking to one of the representatives from Lilly because he seemed very young. So like compared to all the other ones who look very old. So I was like, maybe let me approach him, let me talk to him. So I spoke to him. He was in marketing, and he told me that at the time being, he was not applying. Lilly was not taking international students. So I didn't bother for a long time. But when you stay in a Midwest city, which is known for something, you hear about that again and again. So I knew that a lot of teachers in Cranot had already worked at Lilly, or they were going to work at Lilly, or somebody in the executive committee in Cranot was from Lilly, and things like that. I knew that the Lilly funda, or like the Lilly environment was a lot, and people talked about it a lot. And I know that more Americans talked about it because they had heard about the work culture, the benefits, and everything like that. So I knew all this, but at the back of my mind, it was like, oh, there's no point because I'm an international student, they're not going to take me. But when the career fair approached, I was told that they started making an exception this year. That is when I was like, no, now that I've heard so much about this company, I want to go and I want to apply for their position. So I looked at their positions, and they had a supply chain position and they had a procurement position, and I applied for both. But fortunately, not what yeah I got called for an interview for the procurement role, and that is what I did. And that role description also says that you don't have to have a certain degree, like it doesn't have to be bachelor's in procurement, because that is there's nothing like that,
There's nothing.
anything. You could be in marketing, you could be in supply chain or finance. That role was open to a lot of people. So I think that is one of the ways that I came across procurement, and I was like, this sounds interesting, it sounds different, and I didn't want to be in the manufacturing supply chain side of the business. So this was like, okay, this is something that looks like it could be a good fit, and I love my role. So
Amazing. I think you already answered the next question, but how did you get the interview for this role? Was it through the career fair, or was it just by applying online and then following up at the career fair and then kind of going from there?
Yeah, that is also a very good story. So the insides of this is that, so tying it back to when my roommate said, the line is short, go talk to somebody. So I went to talk to somebody, but you know how when Purdue Career Fair was virtual, there were many reps from the company, but they were from different departments. It would say that so and so person is hiring for marketing, so and so is hiring for this. Now I go online and I see that there's no more left for supply chain and procurement, and that all the time is over. And that is what I'm looking at. So now I'm like, what to do, what to do, what to do. So I hop onto talking one-on-one with a marketing rep. And the first thing I say is that, hey, I don't want a position in marketing, but I want it in so-and-so department, but I think I may have missed my chance to speaking to a representative from this, and I don't see any time slots for the evening. So is there any way you can get me to connect to somebody? And that guy was so sweet. I would give him so much credit, because he took the initiative of reaching out to the supply chain procurement representative and let them know that there is this person who wants to speak to you. Then she sent me an email and she said, hey, let's set up some time to talk one-on-one. And this is the main recruiter. So I speak to her and we hit it off instantly. We're talking about like America's Got Talent and some dance show. And I'm like, what is happening? But it was a good conversation. And then she said, you know what, let me find your time slot for tomorrow with an actual rep. And I said, yeah, that sounds good. So then she made the initiative of like reaching out to the procurement rep and saying that, hey, this is Hashika and she needs time. And I'm guessing there are a lot more other students. So they ended up putting more time slots for the next day. The next day I spoke to them, and then just like that, I waited, and they were so quick to respond, because I think within 3 days I had an interview set up with them. But then there were also 3 rounds of interviews. So I went through the first, I went to the second, then the third one. And the third one, it was with 3 people, 3 different times. So there was a lot of process. But yeah, this is how I got it. I got it through the career fair, but I got it also through inter people in Lilly who were very sweet and helpful and ready to, I don't know, connect me with procurement reps.
That's such an interesting and unique story that you've shared. So you kind of also touched this a little bit. What was the interview process like?
Oh, yeah. So the interview process was, I initially spoke to the marketing rep. So that was the first time. It was just a one-off call. Then I spoke to the main recruiter. That was also just a one-off call. Then I spoke to the procurement rep, and we talked about the roles and positions, just gaining more understanding of like, what is the job requirement and things like that. Then the formal interview, which is the 4th one I would consider, was the first behavioral round of questions, just situational based, behavioral based questions I had with 2 people. Then the next one was also behavioral based, but it had 1 or 2 technical questions, just of the foundations and principles of procurement. Like, say you have to purchase this, how do you go about it? Like, what are the steps you're going to take? How are you going to negotiate the price? How are you going to find your vendor? And things like that. And for that one, I had 3 different people, 3 different kind of interviews, but the basis of it was same: behavioral and technical questions. So it was the same format, but it was with 3 different people. Just to, I think that was kind of good, because when you have three people giving an opinion about one same person, it can say a lot about who that person is or who that candidate is, instead of having those three people in that same panel, at the same time. So yeah, I think that that is how we did it. Then after that, I had one interview with HR, but it was not an interview per se. It was just more about what are their expectations, what is the benefits and everything that look like. And yeah, that was all.
Got it. So from the first interview till the last, what was the duration?
Very short. It was I would say September was the thing. I had my offer October, and I would say 1 month, but I think it was less than that.
Less than
I
a
would
month.
say, but I think it was 3 weeks.
Got it. And how long after your final interview round did you get the offer?
My final interview round, give me a second. I got it in October, and then October, 3 weeks. I think I got it within 10 days.
Within 10 days.
I got it within 10 days. I remember because when I gave the interview, I got COVID that time. And when I received an answer, I had gone to visit my cousin in Phoenix because I was so sad and alone because I was quarantining. And I went the day that I got out of quarantine. So yeah, that was within 10 days.
Got it. Any last piece of advice for any international student who might be listening to this and who is new to the US and is looking for a full-time opportunity?
Most definitely. I love this question because I have so much to say and I won't be able to concise myself. So stop me if you feel like. But the first and foremost thing I would say is that don't be scared. I come across people time and time again who are just constantly worried. They are just constantly worried about how they're going to do it. How are they going to find people, things like that. People get it. I know all of the international students in my batch, at least, we were all placed within full-time offer. The only thing it requires is hard work and consistency. Like consistency is so important. You have to keep applying, you have to keep reaching out, you have to try different methods that work for different people. For me, for both of the interviews and jobs that I got from America were through campus recruiting. But I know that there are people who say that campus is a waste of time. Go to Google, go to the company job. Some people say referrals work best. So you need to figure out what works best for you. Don't take one person's advice and just keep following that track. You should try all of the different methods and see what works best for you and be consistent with that. And the second thing is that don't feel that just because you're a freshman or a sophomore, you don't have any impact or weight and you can't go and talk to them. You must go and talk to them. The more you go and talk to them and the frequency that you talk to them will tell them that no, you're actually interested. That is what will set you apart from the rest of the international students. Because if you think about it, if there are 100 companies coming for the career fair, there are maybe 20 who are taking international students. And all of those international students at Purdue are applying to that same 20 companies. So how do you differentiate yourself? That is being consistent. That is making sure that you're there in front of them time and time again, that you're talking to them and that you actually remember your conversations that you had with them previously. That's why. And the third thing is be as involved as possible in Cranot. There are so many opportunities and resources. I think that I did my very best in capturing them. But now that I'm out of college and I still hear people talk and I'm like, oh my God, I could have done that as well. I could have done that as well. So there is not enough time for the amount of resources that Purdue is giving you. You need to capture the ones that are in front of you. Don't let it go. So when you go for Doster leadership conferences, you meet these recruiters. You can talk to them. When you do case competitions, recruiters are coming and they're looking at you and they're seeing how you're presenting cases, so they want you. There are prizes which can result in interviews and things like that. When you're taking a leadership position, you can invite panelists, you can invite companies to come and talk. So the more you're involved, the more you'll be out there. So these are the three things that I would say. Yeah.
Those are phenomenal points. Harshika, thank you so much for your time. Your story is particularly unique and the insights that you have shared are going to help a lot of international students. I am sure about that. So thank you.